Hi, and welcome back to this Tuesday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. You are listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio. Number to call if you'd like to weigh in on what we've been talking about this day, this religious oppression of this bakery shop being forced to close, this couple in Oregon being forced to shut down their business by the intimidation, the harassment, the death threats from the homosexual lobby. And what that indicates about shrinking religious liberty in America. If you got opinion on that, want to weigh in on that, love to hear about it. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And then your reaction to this defund Obamacare effort and your reaction to Republican lawmakers that are fighting this. Republican lawmakers that will not sign on with the Ted Cruz, Mike Lee letter, Dave Meadows over in the Congress, will not sign on this effort to defund Obamacare through this continuing resolution. And remember, what they're offering to do is they're offering to fund a lot of bad stuff. I mean, in an ideal world, you'd be looking at trimming the budget down in all sorts of places. They're saying no, and I support them in this because we live in a real world. It's not a perfect world. I support them in this. Let's present a budget, a continuing resolution to President Obama and to the Democrats that funds the entire government except for Obamacare. The only thing we're not going to fund is the implementation of Obamacare. We do not want to hire those 16,000 IRS agents. We don't want that federal data hub to be built out that has all our confidential information on it. We don't want to be paying Planned Parenthood $1 million to go out there and educate communities on how to get signed up for Obamacare. We don't want that stuff, and so we want to stop it. So we're going to fund everything in the government, all of your precious plans. We're going to fund all of those except for Obamacare, and you've got Republicans that will not sign on to this. How do you feel about this? Amy Kramer saying, hey, it's an indication that they've just been in Washington too long. 888-589-8840. And here is a businessman, clip 14. Here's a businessman. His name is Ron Jones, owns a restaurant called Po Folks in a city in Alabama. And he's talking about the impact of Obamacare on his business. And remember, when we are talking about people that work in restaurants, we are talking about the little guys. These are the people that President Obama says he cares about. First thing he thinks about in the morning, last thing he thinks about at night, the little people in America. Well, here he is just trampling them, shredding their jobs, slashing their hours, and forcing them to lose their health insurance. Here's Po Folks restaurant owner Ron Jones.
Po Folks restaurant owner Ron Jones employs anywhere from 30 to 40 area residents on a full or part-time basis. Jones will cut down on full staff and hours to avoid paying employee health insurance. Jones says employee health insurance implementation would put him out of business.
We had 30 people, and 15 or 16 of them were full-time. Now I can only have four of the full-time positions.
Okay, so they go from 30 people on his staff, 15 or 16 of them, half of them full-time. Now all he's going to be able to afford is 4 full-time positions. Everybody else is going to have to be less than 30 hours for him to stay alive, for any of them to have jobs. People say, well, he's just being greedy. What he's saying is he's out of business, and then none of those 30 people have a job. Right now, 26 of them are going to have part-time jobs. 4 of them are going to have full-time jobs. That's 30 people that are employed. If he tries to do it Obama's way, he's out of business, and 30 people, all 30 of them, none of them, not a single one of them, have a job. 888-589-8840. Let's grab clip 21. This is Howard Dean talking about Ted Cruz, and I just love what he says here. Let's listen to Howard Dean on Ted Cruz if he becomes president.
Ted Cruz may be a very good politician, but he certainly doesn't know anything about health care. First of all, Obamacare is, in fact, going to, as John McCain suggested in 2008, eventually going to separate health care from employment. That's actually a good idea which John McCain put forward, and that's going to happen gradually and carefully. Second of all, I don't want the Texas Insurance Commissioner being the commissioner up here in Vermont. And so buying insurance across state lines is a terrible idea. We've had universal health insurance for all our kids for 20 years. They have 22% of their children uninsured in Texas. I don't want anything to do with Texas's health care system in Vermont, and I don't want our people buying Texas health insurance. So these are crazy ideas that are from the far right. He's a slick spokesman, and God help us if he ever does get to be anything more than the senator from Texas.
So last thing Howard Dean says is, God help us if he ever gets to be the president of the United States. And my response to that is, God just might do that. God just might help us if Ted Cruz becomes the president of the United States. Well, let's go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's begin with Dave in Jacksonville, Florida. Dave, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Well, a few things about the religious liberties, but first of all, I want to say thank you for the show you do, because in this day and age, too many Christians are afraid to stand up and actually do what the Bible requires of them by speaking out for the truth.
Well, thank you, Dave. You're exactly right. It's critical. I mean, our religious liberties are vanishing at an alarming rate, and if every Christian doesn't begin to find some backbone and moxie and stand up, at least to verbalize opposition to what's going on, we're gonna be neutralized, silenced, locked up in a box somewhere.
Oh, I agree. Well, my thing is, if you're talking about the atheists up there in Massachusetts,
yeah.
Well, if they can go and get a Supreme Court ruling that, all these crosses be taken down and God be taken out, well, how come hasn't a single activist or liberty group or any of these atheist groups gone out and say they don't want to see the Islamic moons up above the mosques or Islamic pillars in the school systems taken down? How come Christianity is the only one? Because Christianity, like Jesus said, is the truth. They did not like Jesus. They will not like you. Because he's the truth. They don't want the truth.
Well,
they don't mind Buddhism. They don't mind Sikhism. Because they don't mind anything that is not the truth.
Right.
The truth convicts them and condemns them, and they do not like it.
Yeah, their objection, and Dave, you're exactly right. The objection of the secular fundamentalists is to Christianity. Their objection is to Christ. They're fine with Islam being taught in schools. They're fine with curriculum that exalts Islam. They're fine with displays on Islam that glorify Islam. They're fine with students being indoctrinated into Islam and forced to memorize verses from the Quran and dress up like Muslims and practice the 5 pillars of faith. They're fine with all of that because it's not Christianity. It's not Christ. It's Christ that they cannot handle and Christ that they've got to try to neutralize. All right. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. Let's go to Frank in West Tennessee. Frank, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I mean to talk about how not only in our country do we have an absence of and an attempt to remove Christ from our government and from this country, we're seeing also a watering down. I think it started with a watering down of our faith, of trying to even corrupt our faith. We have, in this country, we have more and more. We're seeing denominations now declare that they will recognize homosexuals, and homosexuality is not a sin, even though that is obvious. Obviously, a sin is spoken out in the Bible as a sin. If you keep getting, we keep watering down our faith. That's one of the problems.
Yeah. And one of the problems I think, Frank, that we have, one of the realities is that Christians think that God has called us to be nice. This is one of the major errors that I see with Christian thinking today is Christians believing that God has called us to be nice. He has not called us to be nice. He has called us to be good. Nice people never confront evil. Good people must. Good people do confront evil. Nice people never do. And so a lot of Christians think, hey, we're supposed to be nice. If we do anything that's remotely confrontational, it makes people uneasy, it makes people upset, it gets people angry with us, and we must have done something wrong. Somehow that is our fault, rather than the fact being that the truth is offensive and they just don't like the truth. We represent the truth and they don't like us for that reason. So I think that's, one of the real problems is that Christians are nice when they should be good.
But I do also like to point out that there's the other side of it. If we're not careful, implying that remember that we are it's the Prince of Peace that has called us. That we are supposed to be those that bring the good news, and that all things can be peaceful through Christ.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not careful, we do end up with the militants. We do end up inspiring those who are ready to take it too far. We end up with it's been 20 years since we had the crazies trying to bomb the abortion clinics. We don't need that again.
Right, exactly right. Well, and that's where Martin Luther King Jr. was such an example, because you talk about representing a group of people that had a right to sort of take vengeance into their own hands. It would be blacks because of the way they were treated. And he said, look, in the spirit of Christ, we've got to do this in a way that is not violent. We need to be firm. We need to be people of our convictions, but we are not going to use violence in any way, shape, or form to accomplish our purposes. If other people are going to use violence against us, we may not be able to stop that, but we are not going to use violence against anyone. So that's a good word, Frank. I appreciate that. Let's go to Billy in Lubbock, Texas. Billy, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Yes, sir. I had a question. Last Thursday night, I was cooking dinner, and I was listening to a news program on PBS, and I just kind of what caught my attention was they said the IRS is going to start recognizing homosexual marriage.
Yes.
Regardless of what state.
That's correct.
They live in. And I haven't heard anything else about that. And how can they do that? I mean,
well, again, Billy, it's just an effort on the part of the federal government to sort of intrude into the business of states. And what the IRS is doing is they're telling homosexual couples, if you live in a state that does not recognize same-sex marriage, and you got married in a state that does, say you got married in Massachusetts, you moved to Mississippi, Mississippi won't recognize your homosexual marriage, but we, the federal government, will. We will recognize you. You file jointly as a married couple, and we will recognize that, even though your state does not. And historically, what the IRS has always done is they have accepted the state's determination on these matters, because historically, marriage has been the province of the state. So what you're going to have now is enormous legal pressure and societal pressure on the states to conform to what the IRS is doing, and you're going to wind up through tax forms essentially legitimizing same-sex marriage. Focal Point in the AFR Talk, back after the news.